those beautiful clouds?
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it the best can. Stand around and be blind to the frost can. Taking no more, how can they relax there? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. I just wanna see your smile, baby. Living on earth, we must respect the earth. Human and animal, we all deserve the right to peace and opportunity.
This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for November 1st, 2014. I have Russ Tanner with us today as always, thankfully. No show without Russ. Greg Palin from Georgia. Greg's always in the fight. I'm grateful for all the help Greg gives and all he's done, and it's been a great asset to our cause. And we'll get the question and answer, get Russ and Greg in the conversation here pretty fast. We have another engineered cool down. Geoengineered snowstorms begin again. The power structure after what will probably be the warmest October globally on record had to have something happen in October so they could have a few headlines, some cold temperatures, and it's important for people to remember those cold temperatures are very shallow compared to historical norms. The atmosphere is stratifying, it's layering, so this cold air sits at the surface and it's often much warmer aloft. Historically, this is not normal, not natural, but it provides some cold temperatures on the ground. So they had to have an October snow somewhere to make some headlines before the end of the month. We've just had the warmest September on record, warmest August on record, warmest June on record, warmest May on record, warmest April on record. Geoengineering is an illusion. Not that it's not cold on the ground, because it is, but it's not an overall picture of the overall atmosphere and the overall climate system. So people need to take note of these snowstorms, how fast they flare up, how radically the temperatures change. An example I often give, Amarillo, Texas, 2013, May 1st, 100 degrees in the ground, all-time record high, snowed the next day. Then the October snowstorm, October 4th, 2013, that killed 100,000 cattle. We documented that one quite well. So keep in mind, nothing natural about the weather, nothing natural at all. And we look at the sort of distractions that the media throws at us, that the quote-unquote environmental groups throw at us, and I'm not slandering anybody who's a true environmentalist. I certainly consider myself one to the gills. I would convert back to teepees and acorns in a world that was healthy in an instant and live primitively in a scenario where my children had a future. So I am an environmentalist as well, but many people who claim that term seem unwilling or unable to face reality. And we see things like, I saw something on a documentary yesterday, this big push between the Chinese and the U.S. Air Force, both Air Forces, that they're trying to convert cooking oil to jet fuel, as if that's going to make a damn bit of difference in any way, shape, or form. But it makes a lot of environmentalists happy. So with this new big facility and all this media and all this push, they can convert about a half a ton a day of cooking oil. And that's enough to keep a KC-135 in the air for about 12 minutes, 14 minutes. There might be 1,000 of those aircraft, not to mention all the other commercial aircraft flying every day, burning a gallon of fuel a second. It's virtually meaningless. So much of what we see is nothing but smoke and mirrors to distract the population and to lull them into complacency, thinking that somehow technology is going to salvage this train wreck that we're all on. And the only thing that will salvage it is to change course, to completely and radically change course. And the environmental groups, again, I've been completely frustrated with their lack of participation in the true common good, starting with climate engineering. They just simply won't acknowledge it. And it's hard not to look at groups like that and just see them as frauds when they won't acknowledge the most important issue of all. And why are they there? Just like the Alzheimer's Association we talked a lot about in recent weeks seems to have a revolving door with the aluminum industry. So this is something that our whole society is built on, this type of hypocrisy, and that's why we're in the spot we're in. But thankfully there are some biologists that I'm communicating with now and connecting with other biologists. I'm trying to connect a few people that are ready to start dispelling what they know and disseminating their information. So let's hope that people that have been silent for a long time that realize the ship is going down start to sing. And that's what we absolutely need to have. And there's a lot of people in the movement with a lot of ideas about the only way to solve climate engineering is this or that, or to stop it is, to have this legislation or to pass this bill. And I would argue this, and I have argued this, you can't fight a battle without an army. Until you reach critical mass of awareness with the population, how can you possibly get anything done? Legislatures, agencies, nobody's going to listen. They're mandated not to listen until the public is screaming mad. Until you have an army, you can't fight a battle without an army, and we are fighting a battle. There's no question about that. So first and foremost, we must keep the horse in front of the cart. We must raise awareness. We must reach critical mass. Once we do that, once attorneys, for example, realize, like environmental attorneys, that they are going down with the ship, they'll pick up that ball and carry it. The same with other academicians that are currently ignoring the situation because they feel it's not in their best interest. It's bad for their career, perhaps. Once they realize their career doesn't matter, their retirement doesn't matter, they and their families are going down with the ship, they'll join us. And we have to reach that point. We have to have an army or we can't fight the battle. And too many people also in the movement are currently not acting. They're waiting for someone else to tell them to act. And again, I argue, this battle we fight is like the colonists, that were not organized, but they fought very effectively from behind rocks and trees, wherever they were at. If you're standing in the middle of the field and the football's sitting in front of you, don't wait for the rest of the team to show up. Pick the ball up and run with it. Perhaps you're the one that will score the winning touchdown, that will cause this issue to come to light. So everybody needs to carry that ball, and thankfully a lot of activists are. I mean, I'm very, very uplifted by what I see a lot of activists doing. And again, I'll use Greg for example. Again, Greg's gotten billboards up in multiple locations, and I want to mention Frank and Terry Reps also. Not sure if he's listening, but they're helping with the billboards as well. And I mean, helping to a degree that I'm very uplifted by this. I mean, they've taken that ball and ran with it. Now they're connecting with Greg, and that the billboard campaign is moving on quite rapidly, and it makes a difference. That's a very tangible method to wake people up. So everybody pulling together is truly advancing our cause forward rapidly. I got an email this morning from someone that was in an area that appears to have been part of what might be a newer application for a chemical cool down. She said the temperature dropped about 30 degrees after a flurry of jets went over. I've experienced similar things, not to that degree. I live in a very remote area, and I try to be outside when I believe they're chemically nucleating. And what you can hear is, again, constant aircraft going over. You don't have a lot of precipitation falling because the endothermic reaction that takes place in the clouds when they're chemically nucleating dries up a lot of that moisture. It's part of the process. But if you're in the right spot at the right time, you feel a blast of air come down from the sky. That it's like someone opened the freezer door above your head. This is part of what they're trying to accomplish. And this person described this, and she was quite alarmed by it, understandably so. But we'll see more and more of this sort of thing happening as they try to mask the fact that the climate system is horribly damaged, the planet's in meltdown, and people need to understand, again, the engineered nature of the cool downs, because even a lot of people in our own movement don't seem to put that into their equation. They recognize the climate engineering is going on, but somehow in the cool downs they just seem to put that into the natural category. It's not natural. So as we're dealing with this battle, there's also, we see more and more dissension in the society as a whole, more and more fracturing. As conditions get tougher, we're bound to see that. And I got a letter this morning I want to read that someone sent to me and asked if I would address this on the air. And I want to, because it seems it's a glaring example of what we perceive as, quote, law enforcement that's gone off the rails. And we see a lot of this. I'm not slandering all law enforcement at all, but we do see a lot of this, and it's getting worse. And it's going to continue to get worse until enough people wake up to counter this effect. But this is from Dave and Kim Dortch, and the headline is "A Family Battles Police Harassment in Riverside County." And this is what those of us that are more active may face at some point. But it says, Dave Dortch, an optometrist, and his wife Kim, a nurse, nutritionalist, therapy practitioner, tell their story of ongoing police harassment after their 12-year-old son was arrested and charged for graffiti. Now, this family has been harassed continuously due to one small incident that their son was apparently involved with. Their home was searched, and they were... a little computer issue here. They were searched and harassed for months on this issue, and in fact, their whole home was searched. The husband was handcuffed out in the backyard while this was going on. Police were apparently, it says in one point, they were playing pool, going through their cupboards. They even rummaged through his wife's lingerie drawer. We'll hear how their son was arrested multiple times for the same crime, once from the school, in ankle shackles, taken to juvenile jail, where he's forced to experience inappropriate conditions. This goes on and on and on. And we see more of this happening in society as it's fractured, and as those in law enforcement are convinced that what they're doing is somehow for the good of the whole, and it's not for the good of the whole. And it's up to us to try to be cohesive enough and vocal enough and educated enough to counteract those in law enforcement that have gone off the rails. Thankfully, in Northern California, there's, I believe, 8 sheriffs that are part of the Oath Keepers. And this is certainly, in this particular case, with these people that were harassed in Riverside, appears to be one of the reasons they were harassed, because the father of this family was part of a group like the Oath Keepers. So this is how the power structure starts to strike back at people who are fighting, whether it's fighting climate engineering or trying to expose 9/11. We're bound to see more of this sort of thing start to happen. So it's something we all need to keep on our radar as society starts to disintegrate. Russ, Greg, you guys have had some pretty heavy spraying there, I understand. I talked to George Barnes from Skyder Alert. He said the spraying he saw was the heaviest he'd ever seen. I'm hearing that from quite a few people. What's conditions like where you're at, Russ?
Well, we have an interesting thing that happened a couple months ago. I know I've talked about this recently, but we had another incident. This is the third time I've seen this happen, where heavy spraying suddenly, daily heavy spraying, it looked like a war zone every day here in Philadelphia, turned into high jets with non-persistent trails. So that's what we're getting most of the time here now. Now, there are some days where we do see the war zone type look, maybe 6 days out of the month. But what we do see are the remnants. And for people, unfortunately, most people who are not versed in this subject don't really know what to look for. But the remnants are all over the sky every day. And people, unfortunately, don't know how to recognize that these are not natural clouds these days, unfortunately.
No, that's a good point. And it's gone on so long, and now it's getting so consistently painted in the sky that people can't recognize an aerosol cloud from a natural cloud, from a stratocirrus or a cumulus. They've forgotten the fact that a sky should be blue, clouds should be white and defined. You don't have this when you look toward the horizon, you see the light shining through. Most of the time now, you have this very painted, obscure, diffuse light that glares down through this canopy, this overstory of aerosols mixed in with natural clouds. And in commercials, movies, you almost never see an untainted sky now. Is that not true?
That's true. I mean, what happened to the weeks or several weeks of clear blue deep sky that we used to have growing up that I remember that suddenly ended when this program began? I know what a cloud looks like. I mean, those cumulus clouds are the most common type clouds we would have ever had. They're very well defined. Today we see all kinds of different strange formations that I've never seen before the spraying started. And not only that, the cumulus clouds that you do see are very fuzzy around the edges. They look different than they used to be, and I think it's because of the nucleation. You've got all the particles that are not allowing them to have that beautiful, sharp definition they used to have.
A lot of strange light refraction, right? Lots of that. And, the color hues you see coming out of some of these clouds are a good indication of that. And as we see right now, the
hues, Dane, the hues a lot of times, they look like oil slicks in water.
They do.
They don't look like, and what's interesting in correlation is that we have people reporting all over the world to me for a couple of years now how they wake up in the morning and there's a sheet of oil, a film of oil on their car windshields.
That's what it looks like. I've had films on my ponds here in the woods that it look like that. It's almost a crust. And when I first saw this about 8 years ago, I thought surely that can't be all metals. I mean, it was just like a layer of glitter all over the ponds. It wads up in the corner where the wind pushes it to the side. And I tested it, and it was absolutely, almost totally these metals. Whatever other film was there, the majority of the test was these metals that had just built up on the surface, and it is that bad. Water hyacinth, if anybody knows what water hyacinth is, it stopped growing on my ponds. It used to proliferate so much that you had to constantly throw it out of the ponds. But about 2004, 2005, water hyacinth is particularly susceptible to metals, toxic metals. So it stopped growing. It completely stopped growing. And I called around the state of California to find out if other people were experiencing the same issue, and indeed they were. In fact, they canceled the Water Hyacinth Festival in L.A. because nothing was growing. And this is the sort of thing that you wonder, how can so many in a society be so blind to something so glaring, obvious, and dangerous? And this is the sort of society we live in right now, while everybody, again, recreates on the deck of the ship while it's going down. And with the sort of headlines we see coming around us, and I'll read a few of those now. And again, I've mentioned this website before. Greg, I think you've seen the website Rice Farmer. Haven't I given that to you as well?
Yes, definitely.
Have you been able? Have you taken a look at that?
Yeah, I actually, you told me about it. You mentioned it last weekend, and it was kind of a crazy week this week. But I did briefly go on. I follow so many different websites, but I believe you. I'm going to spend more time on it.
That particular one, if I can encourage everybody to take a look, because there's no politics, no advertising, nothing. And it's a really, really good comprehensive list of what's happening in the world right now, what's going on with the crash of the petrodollar, which is the only thing that's kept the empire afloat. We have currency wars going on. Here's another headline, slowing of world trade and growth, globalization. The whole global economic system right now, and it's all categorized again. And if you Google rice farmer, it's the top one on the list. This guy is a rice farmer from Japan that posts this, but it's the best, most simple, easy to browse, and updated site I found. But the bottom line is there's enough data right there at easy access to make clear the fact that this card house that's been modern civilization is crashing by the day. It's absolutely crashing by the day. So with the power structure trying to hide this fact, along with trying to hide what's happening with the climate, everything is sort of shrouded in smoke and mirrors, and a lot of people are okay with that because they don't want to face facts, but they're going to have to face facts soon. So, again, the more aware we are of what's going on and why, the commodities were pounded down yesterday. I don't know if Greg or Russ, if you saw that. I mean, they're pushing precious metals down to unbelievable lows. They have to in order to try to protect the value of the dollar as long as possible. That's what's supporting all this activity in our skies, all the imperial adventures overseas. It's all a complex system of smoke, mirrors, levers, and strings, but it's starting to come unhinged. I mean, is there here, Greg, in Northern California, people are largely still completely oblivious to the fact that the system we've known is coming unhinged by the day. Any different in Georgia?
It's funny you asked that question, Dane, because I just got off the phone with a sales guy. I had a few truck problems last night, and I was making some phone calls, and everybody that I come in contact with, I bring up the topic, and this guy's name is George, and he addressed the geoengineering topic with his kids, and he said, just watch this guy. He was down at Peachtree City, and he said, I saw, a grid of 10 or 15 of these trails, and his grown children were telling him, Dad, you're crazy. You actually think, the old you're not saying line, you're not saying that the government would spray us. So, and I told George, I said, hammer your kids, send them to Geoengineering Watch, and I wanted to read my essay that I wrote the other day, and just the idea that, you can provide people with all the information in the world, but if you can't get them to self-reflect on whether they're being a good human being and whether they're engaging in the matrix, wholeheartedly and not paying attention to reality, and he said, yeah, I'm going to send him, he was going to give his kids, he had already spent time on Geoengineering Watch, but he was going to give his kids the link. So I am seeing more people that, whether I'd like to see them get more active physically, and get out there with signs. And on that note, we did visit Helen Heinley yesterday up in Dawsonville. Dane and Russ, I know you guys know her, and we looked at her alfalfa, and we looked at her trees, and I'm sorry, go ahead, Russ.
No, I said that's great. I know I've talked to her many times. She's a great supporter. Go ahead.
Yeah, she had just called me quite a few times, and I appreciate her persistence, and we finally did get up there because we've been so busy with this cabin, but spent several hours up there looking at her alfalfa and her trees, and basically the leaves on all their plants curling up and burned holes in them, and just really nasty evidence that she has there. And obviously she had, close contact with the jet in 2012, in May, I believe it was, in 2012, came right over her house and sprayed her neighbor's fields, and she's been seeing the repercussions of whatever they did spray. And I think part of the problem is people like her obviously are in touch with nature, and Dane, you and I, and Russ, we're big nature lovers, so we do notice the changes in the trees, obviously more so in California where you guys are really getting hammered and the trees are dying. But she's paying very, very close attention, and gosh, if we could just get more people to pay that kind of attention to the fact that there's, I replaced flowers here in Atlanta 4 times this year where there's burn holes and it's killing my zinnias, and it's sad, and I wish people would pay more attention to the physical aspects of what's going on around them.
Yeah, the world dying around them. You mentioned earlier, a point, Greg, a good human being. What's it mean to be a good human being? Does that mean that you just go along with everything, you don't make waves, you show up to work on time, and you do your civic duty, whatever that might be? Is that being a good human being really? Or is it breaking out of that box, realizing what's flawed with the system, what's wrong with the paradigm we're in, standing up, making your voice heard, again, grabbing that ball up off the field, not waiting for the rest of the team to come show up and tell you what to do, but picking it up, carrying it, and figuring out what's best for the common good. And it's up to all of us to do that. And the sort of damage you see that Helen noted, we see the same thing here. I mean, a lot of this material, in fact, we saw horrific damage after the only ice nucleated event we had last year that was of significance, where this material flash burned the foliage that it hit. Even though temperatures were only in the high 20s, we had, again, palm trees, date palms that are good to low single-digit temperatures. They were almost killed. Mature palm trees were almost killed because this material was so powerful, it just flash burned the hell out of these plants. In fact, it did kill some citrus trees that we had, again, even though the temperatures were nowhere near what these trees can tolerate. So God only knows what they're putting in the mix at this point to try to hide the sort of unraveling that's happening with the climate. But I'm glad Helen's noticing it. Hey, Russ, why don't you open up the phone lines real quick, and we'll try to take calls coming in and answer as many questions as we can at the same time. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, absolutely. Though, for those who want to call in and ask a question or speak with us a bit, the phone number is 718-717-8296. It's 718-717-8296. Just call in, and then just please try to mute your phone for the moment. We'll call on you when we're ready.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Russ, or Greg, I know Helen's been very observant of what's going on around her, and a lot of people now are certainly starting to see it, but it's still astounding. I mean, again, in a Northern California city like that, which I live in, where the trees were a main feature of the city, the trees are all dying, and it's amazing how many people will grab at some sort of basic statement that they've been trained to repeat, that, oh, it's just all cyclical, or oh, we've seen this before, or, you know, that's part of the narrative. That's part of the idiocracy that you see in the Weather Channel and all these mainstream weather disseminating agencies. They try to propagate that. In fact, when there's a very serious event like the drought in California, you'll hear some of them say, this hasn't happened for a number of decades. Well, it hasn't happened ever. In fact, according to paleo data, nothing like this has happened in at least 2,000 years, but you don't hear them talking about that. They'll simply try to find some date or make some correlation that makes people think, oh, this has happened before, so it's no big deal. You guys ever notice that? You ever notice that they try to make something appear as if it's part of a normal cycle, or it's happened before, or, you know, to try to set people more in a complacent mode about it?
Oh, absolutely. We see this in advertising all the time. We actually have a video from a commercial that has a clip from an old movie where they have deliberately put, and I've been waiting for this to happen. It didn't happen sooner because I think it would be such a giveaway, but where we have actually seen them put the trails in the sky in old movies, and in this to where they have a clip from an old movie, they actually did this. So this is all part of the normalization process, you know.
Now, in some of these, you know, there may be some inserts of some of these movies. I'm convinced, because we know these programs have gone on since the late 40s, and I've looked at some of that footage, and I'm convinced that those trails were above some of those sets. In fact, maybe they made it a point to be above some of those sets, because clearly, if you look at the amount of time and planning that has gone into these programs, and the sort of massive effort that was undertaken to try to make this conditioning so total that they could perhaps keep these programs going forever, why would they not make it a point to be in the airspace above some of these big box office films that would give them such a record to say, oh, this has always been normal, there it is? Because we know this has been going on that long. There's absolutely, positively no question it's been going on at a fairly large scale since the late 40s. Nothing compared to today, but still a scale of significance. And we know this because the temperature, the global temperature linear rise that was occurring until the late 40s started to go downhill in the late 40s. In fact, it was so anomalous that by the 70s, about 25% of climatologists were completely perplexed at why global temperatures had taken a pause, if you will, at that point, that there was even some talk about maybe we're entering an ice age in the early 70s. This was a discussion because they didn't know these programs were going on. And we have studies from Stanford University, for example, on the Arctic haze that they were seeing in the Arctic that was metallic particulates, and they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Clearly these programs are going on that long. So, Russ, you might be right. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not some films that haven't had something, downloaded into them for a sky, because I've talked to a few people that swear they've seen both copies, one with and one without. So you may be exactly right, but I think that there may be also cases where this simply was above their airspace at that time.
I think it was, and I know, from being a sky watcher all my life, the big thing that we bring to people's attention is that I have never seen a trail come out of a jet engine in my life, though, and it was extremely rare, probably with these limited testing programs early on in certain locations. Now, I have talked to a couple people in certain locations in the United States that did see them for periods of time in the past, 20 years ago, and then they stopped. So it was almost like there was some kind of test program that went on over there. This is a large city that I'm thinking of right now that somebody contacted me, and then it stopped. But
that makes sense, though, doesn't it? Doesn't that make sense? I mean, they certainly didn't have the amount of resources they have now, and they're going to experiment some here, some there. The California drought from the late 70s, I know several people here that were highly awake during that time, and they absolutely positively swear that they saw the same type of spraying occurring over the skies during the drought of the late 70s here in California. These people are very articulate, and I believe they're correct. And again, we have the patents, we have the document that anybody can look up if they Google 1966 government document geoengineering, and you'll find an 80-page presidential document that I found on the NASA archives. And clearly, these programs were on a quite large scale in the mid-'60s. That one's from, again, 1966. So,
well, plus it takes a very long time to build the infrastructure. I mean, they need equipment they need to make the materials, which these small particle metals have to be difficult to make. They have to transport them. They have to have ways to load them on the planes, offload them, clean, maintenance, pumps. I mean, tremendous amount of infrastructure that they had to be probably building up over the years as they increased the program.
Which is true, and you hear a lot of people argue that, how could all this go on and we don't know about it? How much else has gone on that we didn't know about, still don't know about, haven't been told about? And the fact that, it's difficult to believe this could be happening doesn't change the fact that it is happening, period. So, the sort of denial that people try to grab at sometimes doesn't really work. Greg, you just share with me some of that, right? Even from your own, I know your own family, my family's the same. I mean, how many people are listening have their families sort of washing their hands of them because of this issue, and families that don't want to face it? You've encountered a lot of that. I have, right?
Yeah, it really is so very sad because we're trying so desperately to wake people up, and I've tried in so many different ways, and in the end, sometimes you just get frustrated and you have to write people off, and some of those people come back, and that's always comforting when they do. It is breaking up families, sadly, and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, families should be able to see this. That's what really is frightening, something so obvious over people's heads. And you have, infighting within families is supposed to be the core of this, one of the cores of this country, is the family unit, and we're being torn apart over something that we should all be on the same side and fighting on the same team. And one point I wanted to make, Dane, was in regard to your brochures, reaching people with a consistent message. I left Helen with a big pile of brochures and a box of DVDs yesterday, and I was just thinking about consistency of message and how powerful that brochure is that you have. And if anybody wants these brochures, and you're on the East Coast, I'm more than happy to mail you a pile of them. Just contact me through my Facebook. Because I think it's really important to hand out literature that people can look at and say, wow, somebody spent a lot of time on this. And it's very professional, pictures worth 1,000 words. And the idea of looking professional when you get out in the public, incredible. And getting out a DVD or a color brochure like the one you have, Dane, it's a fantastic way to introduce the topic without having to say too much and without having to have a world of knowledge yourself about the topic. There's no point in reinventing the wheel.
And also people can download that for free, Greg. That's important. I mean, that's there for free to download. And if you go to Kinko's, for example, even a black and white copy of that, if you actually have them download it right off the site, even a black and white copy can be very clear and are, effective and not expensive. So, have a tool to pass on, or if there's a particular person that would be interested in a particular aspect of this, like if it's somebody that's into vegetable gardening or something, you could find an article that indicates how the soils are being compromised. Make a copy of that article, pass it on, have something credible to pass on to people. Because there's still, I'm looking at a big article right now put out by a major activist, independent news source, talking about the cold, showing the nucleated snows, and we can see this on the radar. It's so clear. You'll see a band of rain that just flashes out the snow for no reason. It's not moving over higher topography, which is called orographic enhancement. It just simply, for no reason, flashes out the snow, and then it will start to fade back to rain as these particulates, the nucleating agents, start to filter down through the clouds. And this particular activist, I'm perplexed. No recognition of the fact that these cool downs are engineered, and I don't understand that. I really don't understand. You've experienced the very peculiar snow firsthand, Greg. Yes.
Most definitely. All the snow videos I made last winter, demonstrated, I think, pretty clearly that something was awry. When snow, it takes 10 minutes for it to form a drop of water over a putting hot wood stove, or you take a MAP gas torch, and you get no liquid out of a snowball. That's just not normal.
Now, I just sent you guys, I don't know if you have your computers on, but it's a NASA shot of China, where in fact Chinese are gagging on their air. They're shutting down businesses. So here you have all the pollution produced on the ground in China. They're spraying over the top of that with aerosols. And again, as I said earlier in the broadcast, the atmosphere is radically stratifying. It's layering. It's not mixing. That means these pollution materials and all the sprayed particulates settle down on the ground. And this is part of what the power structure is trying to do, because if they keep this cold air on the ground, if they can layer the atmosphere so that it's not mixing, so that they can maintain this colder layer on the ground and maintain the illusion of cool, that's part of what holds all this pollution down as well. So the picture I just sent you, Russ and Greg, all around the perimeter, you can see radically RF frequency altered clouds. It's as clear as it can be. And so, this is where all this type of program, when you try to play God with the natural environment, you can only do harm. It can only go wrong. It can only end in total destruction, and that's what we have. I mean, the Chinese are at a point where they can hardly breathe in their cities, literally. It's not going to continue this way much longer. And we see so many RF frequency clouds now as the particulates are sprayed, and depending on the RF application, it appears they can cause a dispersion of those particulates, or a coming together, a coagulation, if they want to cause precipitation. So we see these RF clouds constantly, with this overhead of silvery white skies. You'll see the very uniform ribbing in the clouds, and who knows how much of this frequency we're all being exposed to right now. But the conditions are getting beyond horrible around the globe. The drought in Australia right now, parts of South America. This can't happen. It cannot happen without a factor in this equation that is not being acknowledged by the climate science community. And by the way, you can't discuss climate change legitimately without first and foremost discussing climate engineering. You can't do it. And so the whole climate science community is completely in denial, lying, afraid to speak out, whatever category it's in, or all the above likely. And at the same time, we have again, a lot of activists in the anti-geoengineering community that need to wake up to the fact that a lot of the data that they're running with and looking at is completely skewed and an effect of climate engineering. And what we see, for example, when they do an engineered cool down, in a given regional area, they might take 100 temperature readings so that they have 100 temperature records. If the same size area is under record warm, they'll take one. And that skews the equation radically. And again, there needs to be a recognition of these cool downs as being engineered, because that's exactly what they are. People should know when the temperatures swing so radically that something's really wrong.
Dane, you talked about frequencies a second ago. I get reports from all over the world for years now people hearing a hum. They would just walk outside or walk in different places and they hear a hum. I'm one of those people too. There have been times when I even drove up the road a ways to see how far does this hum go. Now, what's causing it, where it's coming from? Well, it's certainly not natural as far as I can tell, but I've never heard of anything like this before. So I think this kind of artifact that we're hearing just kind of backs up that there's something very big and very artificial going on. And we do have callers in the queue when you're ready as well.
Yeah, let's take them in, and I'll finish with the fact that people should keep their eye on the methane issue. I posted one article on this week. There are certain wheels turning that I don't think they can hide much longer. It's important people keep an eye on the methane issue. Yes, we have a lot of methane spewing from the fracking, no question about that. But on top of all that, we have methane hydrates spewing from the seafloor. And I see people in the anti-geoengineering community that are also denying that and also stating that CO2 is great for everything. CO2 is very necessary. This is the point I'm trying to make. We all have to not think dichotomously. The world isn't black or white. There's balance to everything. Water's good for us, but if we're 10 feet underwater, that's not so good for us. CO2 is necessary in the atmosphere, absolutely. It's a stimulant for plants, absolutely. But what's happening in the oceans right now? Oceans aren't too happy with all that CO2. The oceans are dying. They're acidifying. Crustaceans can't form their shells. So people have to look at the bigger picture. That's all. Look at the bigger picture. Look at all the details. This is not a black or white equation. Same as when people say, oh, the geoengineering is only about trying to kill us all, or it's only about mind control, or it's only about, geoengineering and the spraying is a lot of things. So don't try to put things in this box or that. Let's look at the bigger picture, all of us, so that we stay on a track that is credible and doesn't box us into a corner that's not defendable, if you will. Russ, go ahead.
Yeah, by the way, I want to back up what you said about hazes earlier. I've noticed so often where there was hazes at night, now at night if you have a lot of humidity, you'll see a haze in the air, but what I've noticed is that there's a incredible disproportion between the amount of haze and the humidity. And I've paid attention to this throughout my life. I've always been interested in science, and I've always observed my environment. And we have these nights here in Philadelphia that, and I get this reported everywhere, where there's a tremendous haze in the air, and humidity is relatively low.
Same here. It's the same in California. Yeah, you can really see it as the sun's beginning to set.
Oh, not even the sun. I'm talking about streetlights.
Yeah.
Streetlights. I mean, it's as if it's almost a foggy night, but yet there's no humidity in the air, or it's very unhumid.
It is. I want to mention too. I just got an email from Corey Gunnels, and Corey's a tremendous help in this battle. And she reminded me that I want to state in November 21st in Redding, California, there's a big event. Corey will be the MC at that event and the moderator for the panel discussion at that event. I'm very, very honored that Corey is coming to Northern California for this. She's an extremely level head in this equation, and her participation is paramount. At this event, I will be giving a 30-minute presentation and update. I also have Mark McCandlish, former defense industry employee. Mark's a very, very intelligent and outspoken individual who's brought a lot to our fight. Alan Buckman, former U.S. Air Force meteorologist. He's a 35-year fish and game biologist. 38-year, Francis Mangels, U.S. Forest Service biologist, 35 years experience. We'll have Dr. Stephen Davis here at this event. And also, and this is really important, we have Supervisor Bill Chappelle, one of the Board of Supervisors, which we just did the presentation. Bill is showing tremendous courage against complete opposition from his other board members. He is going to be on this panel as well, this panel discussion. So again, this is November 21st, Friday night. The doors will be open from 6 to 10, the event from 7 to 9, but there'll be a lot of public discussion time. Much of the event will be devoted to the panel discussion, and also just the experts independently sharing with the audience after this panel discussion. So anybody wants information on that, we'll post more on Facebook soon. So Corey, thank you for bringing that up. Russ, go ahead and go to the call.
Excellent. Caller with your phone number that ends in 23. Who are we speaking with?
This is Helen. I thought I'd give a call in.
Hi, Helen.
Hey, Helen.
In response to, I was very glad to meet with Greg and Mary Lou yesterday, and I want to thank you for the DVDs and the literature. I was excited to get that. And again, there's so many topics we could talk about and touch on. I'm so glad to see people, getting together the way you're getting these people now to begin to coalesce and on these panels and these discussions, and seeing people speaking out and working together for this most important cause. And again, to just, right here to touch on the weird weather that we're having. The weatherman reported last Monday we had 80 degrees. On Thursday, Friday, I think it was in the 60s. And over last evening, we had a drop. Wind chills, the weatherman said were expected yesterday evening and through the night in the 20s. Now, we're supposed to have a freeze warning for most of the state of Georgia, I think, overnight tonight. And then by next Tuesday, they're showing 70-degree temperatures again. So if anybody thinks that that's in any way, shape, or form normal, I have to challenge their sanity.
Very true, not normal, Helen. You bring up good points. And one thing I wanted to also mention to people with the ways that they try to make it look colder than it is. Now, I posted yesterday one of the maps from AccuWeather, and all the other major weather disseminating agencies do the same thing. They have different ways of showing, on AccuWeather it's called real field temperatures. What is a real field temperature? It's simply a fictitious temperature that's based on what they believe it would feel like depending on the temperature, humidity, and wind. So you have a map that looks like the temperature map, showing temperatures that are 10, 15, sometimes 20 degrees below what the actual temperature is, but you don't really notice that that's not an actual temperature map, and that's their intent. So people see those maps and they think, my God, it's cold. But in reality, the actual temperatures are much higher than these maps show, and that's just part of the smoke and mirrors program to make it look colder than it is. And of course, there is cold. I'm not saying there's not cold, but they try to make it look even worse. And then, as Helen just said, the temperatures rebound right back up again.
And again, I have to point out that, and Greg and Mary Lou saw this yesterday, that we have the odd lot violets growing, trying to, here at November. Again, the poor planet, they have got it so confused and mixed up. It just doesn't know what to do. So I will not take any more time and jump off and say again thanks to everybody, and thank you for your great article, Greg. And I really recommend people listening to the interview that Dane did with Tom Kelly, the rancher in New Mexico. He had a lot of...
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I really, really highly recommend everyone listening to that. So thanks again, guys. Love everybody, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you so much. And I just got off the phone about an hour ago with a woman from North Georgia. It wasn't related to geoengineering, but she was telling me that they had snowfall in her area, and she was talking about how incredibly rare that was.
Yeah, and let's again, when we noticed that this is the attempt to try to create a headline. Now, we had a lot of people that live in the UK that have been trying to push the point that, again, the planet is seemingly not recognizing the geoengineering effect on these sort of weather events we're talking about. But a lot of people have tried to stand a conclusion that the planet is cooling. Now, UK just had it's heading for its warmest year ever recorded. Australia, last 2 years, warmest ever recorded. It's just important that people recognize this cool down, forget about Al Gore, forget about carbon credits. It's not about any of that. It's just about the fact that even if we looked at climate engineering alone, climate engineering has decimated the planet from top to bottom. It's making a bad situation worse by the day. So it's just important people look at the big picture, look at all the components. Don't run with the headline. A headline is not a fact. Look at data from the ground. Look at what you know. When you have Canada, for example, lost 600% more forest to fires this year than the norm, which is already high. So Siberia, 100 million acres a year, burning to the ground. Tasmania, New Zealand, places that normally never had forest fires. So you need to look at the big picture and understand that the media, like the Weather Channel right now, they're not covering the record warmth we just had in a lot of areas. In fact, Wyoming, I think yesterday, there was some places in the northern tier states, there was record warm temperatures set. They don't talk about that. They don't talk about that at all.
And somebody,
and that was right, Dane. We did have snow flurries here last night.
I know, and it's we're
yeah,
going to see more
in
of
October.
Going to see more of that kind of thing because they can make it snow almost whenever they want this time of year. I mean, George Barnes told me he saw flakes falling in Florida. This is last spring at 70 degrees. You know, I mean, it's astounding what they can do. That's the top end of the scale, but we see it all the time now, even on the weather charts, calling for a forecast of snow at 45 degrees, 48 degrees. People should know this is absolutely not normal.
Hey, Dane, we have a question from the chat room. Plus, we have a bunch of callers in the queue.
Yeah, let's rock and roll.
Trump from the chat room, are you going to film the upcoming events?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely will be filmed in YouTube, professionally filmed, and we will make the most of that event, no question. And also, that event's a launching point for a sit-in at Northern California Channel 7 TV to focus on their chief meteorologist, make an example out of him. He has told their newsroom they cannot touch this issue no matter how much of the community wants them to address questions. They stonewalled the whole community, so we are using the 21st event to organize a sit-in that will come about 2 weeks after that event to try to make an example again out of a meteorologist that is trying to hide this issue. That's what he's doing. It's not okay. So that'll be part of the event. But yes, it'll be filmed YouTube. Yes.
Excellent. These people are participating in the crime. Caller with your phone number that ends in 52. Who are we speaking with?
Yeah. Hey guys.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hi. Yep. You're on. Who is this?
Okay. This is Angel from Dayton, Ohio.
Hi, Angel.
Hey. I wanted to ask you guys a question related to the artificial cool downs. Here last night there was a lot of cloud cover, and I heard like probably 4 or 5 waves of very large airplanes, and it was like sound weaponry, was on these planes, and they came through the clouds, and within seconds the wind started blowing furiously, and the temperature started dropping. And after like the 5th or 6th wave of about 4 planes at once, then it was freezing. And I just want to know if you guys knew about those planes and the type of weaponry they have on there.
Angel, Google engineered snowstorms. You'll find a lot of data. You'll find a lot of articles to go through. And some of those articles I posted YouTube demonstrations of what an endothermic reaction does. And that's how powerful these chemical constituents are. They can, a few drops in a vessel of water can freeze it instantly. This is powerful stuff we're talking about here. So I would Google that. And, thanks for that report. And that's the kind of thing we are going to see more of. So the more people educate themselves on this issue, the more effectively they can share with others on this issue, the faster we'll get people to wake up to what's going on.
Great. All right, thank you. Thank you for that report.
Thanks, Angel. Thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for letting us know. Caller with your phone number that ends in 10. Who are we speaking with?
Hi, guys. This is Dan Sherry in Rochester, New York. How are you today?
Good, Dan. How are you?
Hey there.
Hi, Dan.
Good. Hey, guys, you just a couple, two or three real quick points, and then I do have a question for Dane. It's interesting you're talking about the frequencies that we're all being subjected to. Anybody who doesn't know anything about the Schumann frequency, which is the natural frequency of the Earth, should do a bit of research on that, because the natural frequency of the Earth that has existed since the beginning of time, roughly about 8 hertz, is actually being altered pretty dramatically, and that is going to end up harming living things, whether it's plants, animals, people, etc.
Yeah, if I could elaborate on that too, I agree with you. And what people don't know is certain types of large trees can actually render a voltage reading of about 2 volts. And even power plants, for example, in addition to the frequencies in the air, power plants, all grounding goes into the ground. That's how you ground every structure, every power plant. And that has unknown and unstudied effects that add to the effects of the radio frequency that's being transmitted into the air. So from every direction, everything's an electrical organism, everything alive. And so, yes, this is unknown and unquantifiable effects. You're right, Dan. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and you guys were talking about the effects on the family and how those of us who understand this stuff and we're having problems with family members and it's breaking up the family. I have to say that has to be, if not intentional, it's an unintended consequence of the overall program intentionality. I just wanted to mention too, Dane, that I'm in upstate New York. For the last 2 weeks, we have been absolutely hammered. It's very cold now. We're going to get some snow. Very little today, but it's super, super cold, and I've been fighting off nasal infection. I've had sinus infections my whole life up until a few years ago, but I can tell that there's something that's trying to form, and I've been using colloidal silver, and it does actually seem to help, so it does seem to be bacterial. A lot of people sick here. But anyway, Dane, I did have one question, and I'll drop here to let other callers come in, but I wanted to talk to you a couple of weeks ago. Just please elaborate just for a few seconds or whatever. I have a real hard time understanding, like any of us, we all have a hard time understanding how people can't see chemtrails or they don't accept any of the stuff that we're talking about, the whole breadth of the whole thing. Looking at and researching very deeply what's happening to you guys in Southern California, the depth, the intensity of what's going on as far as the destruction and the drought, etc., I have a hard time believing that people aren't looking around looking for answers. Above and beyond where I am, we get rain, so people are thinking, well, there's no big deal. We have water. We're not stretched to a point where you are. Can you just throw out real quick, I'll drop here, but can you just throw out your thoughts? Is this mind control? Are these people, did they do too many drugs in college or something? I mean, really, how could people as droughted as you are, in as bad a shape, and in such dangerous conditions, how could somebody not, politically or whatever, how could they not be asking questions and paying attention to you? I'll drop off here. Thanks for taking my question.
Thanks, Dan. I'll give 3 factors to that. First, yes, of course, we have elements like fluoride, and we know that fluoridation can affect neurologically a person's will to act, and that's quite well documented. So when we add all the other metals, synergistic toxicity, it does seem to have the proven medical effect of making people more complacent. 2, normalcy bias, very, very, very strong human trait. No matter how bad things look in the sky, how much the walls are closing in, normalcy bias is extremely powerful in the human race. And so as long as the stores are open, as long as the gas station's open, the TV turns on, the football game's coming, it tends to make people ignore a horizon that is turning from dark to black. Also, Stockholm Syndrome. This is the trait that a person tends to protect and not be able to confront their oppressor, that they almost... this is a well-documented syndrome for people who have been captured and held hostage, and people don't want to see their government as what it really is. So you have these very powerful traits that affect the human psyche, and it's always been that way. You have ancient Rome, you've had this sort of trait seen, but, let's add the fluoride and the aluminum, it's a lot worse. So hope that answers that somewhat. Russ?
Yeah, no, let's not forget about mercury, too. Caller, we've only got about 45 seconds with your phone number that ends in 56. Who are we speaking with?
Hi, it's Don. I'm calling from Texas.
Hi.
I'm just wondering about local meteorologists and that kind of thing. Like, how is it exactly that they participate in keeping this under wraps? And would you say that most of them know about it, but know better to keep quiet, or do they receive propaganda from a national organization that they all subscribe to, or how is it that
really important? Very important question. Thank you for that question. Several answers. One, we were told by a Fox News meteorologist they were taken to rooms and told, you do not touch this issue, period. They're reading from a script. Talking about this issue was a bad career decision, and most people are not willing to make that. They're too afraid. Great question, caller.
Thank you for calling in, callers. I'm sorry we didn't get to the rest of you. This is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. We are out of time for today, but be with us next week at ucy.tv at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We will see you next week. This is Russ Tanner on behalf of Dane Wigington and Greg Palin. We'll see you next week.